Hey, how's it going? Before we jump into the content, I just want to take a minute to thank you for stopping by the channel and checking out the content. If you like this content and you want to support more content like it, then make sure to subscribe to the channel and like this video. You can also check out the YouTube membership program and cybertrainingpro.com, where I put practice exams and other things that I couldn't put on YouTube. Again, regardless of how you support the channel and my content, I couldn't be more appreciative. Thank you so much, and let's get into the content. Just like with criminals or enemies in war, there are different types of threat actors, also known as attackers, with different motivations. State actors are a very common type in the news, and this means the attacker or the group is backed by a nation-state government. For example, advanced persistent threats or APT groups fall into this category, and they might have funding and support of a large country like China, North Korea, or Russia, just to name a few with known APT groups. Each country has different motivations, but the main point is that state actors are typically very well funded. Criminal syndicates are groups of individuals that work like a criminal enterprise. Script kiddies are attackers that rely heavily on existing tools or scripts, have low levels of personal expertise, and little funding. This might be somebody who just got bored and decided to download an attack tool, but keep in mind that there's a lot of dangerous tools available that become even more dangerous if the attacker doesn't know what they're doing or they're careless. This is that kind of person that we think of that's going to school or maybe sitting in their mom's basement. Hacktivists are a group that's working towards furthering a movement or a cause. Somebody in this group might support a certain political affiliation and work to undermine their opponent. Insider threats are individuals with legitimate access to an organization's network, and the potential of damage depends on how much access that they actually have. Insider threats can be malicious, like a disgruntled employee that's trying to steal secrets, or they can be unintentional, related to a lack of user awareness training. And then competitors are companies in direct competition with an organization and that seek to narrow the competitive advantage or undermine their competition. Potential activities here can include dumpster diving to steal documents or hiring former employees to gain valuable information, just to name a few. Attack vector is an important concept when it comes to talking about cybersecurity. When we're referencing the attack vector, we're referring to the path or the mechanism that the attacker used. For example, if an attacker sent a malware attachment through email, the attack vector would be email. Attackers also look to use social media to perform reconnaissance against their targets. Now, attack vectors can even be a third party that has connections into our network or software that we already have on our network, and they can compromise. Shadow IT is a big problem for any organization and refers to any unauthorized system or software in our organization. When we can't manage the technologies and software that's on our network, threat actors are going to have an increased chance of finding a way onto the network. Within an organization, there's approval process that getting systems or software added so that we can properly secure and monitor them. If an employee can just add whatever they want, then that can lead to serious security vulnerabilities because they aren't patched or hardened with security features. Malware, which is also known as malicious software, at its core is software with some malicious intent. We're now going to talk about the different types of malware that you need to be aware of. First, let's talk about viruses. A virus is code that attaches itself to legitimate software or applications. With viruses, a user has to launch the legitimate software first, and then the virus attempts to spread before carrying out its function. Worms, on the other hand, are self-replicating malware, meaning that they're able to travel throughout our networks without needing an application to run or for a user to do something. This also means that spikes in network traffic could be worms that are replicating throughout the network, and this could lead to slowing the network performance. Logic bombs are code embedded into an application or a script that's going to run in response to an event. Imagine if we have a system administrator named Bob who has to perform a function every week, and if he happens to get fired and can't perform that function, the system will then crash. That's the logic bomb. Keep in mind though, it doesn't have to just be a system crashing. It could just be some kind of action or thing happening in our network. Backdoors are an alternate way of accessing a system or an application. Developers have been known to create backdoors in case they're locked out, but this could also apply to things like alternate accounts that fired employees or attackers could use to access the network. Trojans look like something legitimate, but are in fact something malicious. You might have heard a story of the city of Troy from Greek mythology, where a wooden horse was used to get inside of an impenetrable city because it was presented as a gift, but it was actually full of warriors. Trojans commonly show up as free antivirus software messages that are trying to entice you to click and install the software. Remote access Trojans or rats allow an attacker to control a system from remote locations and capture things like keystrokes and credentials. Rats frequently come from malicious attachments in emails. Keyloggers are just like they sound, and they capture keystrokes on a computer. These can be part of a rat, but they can also exist on USB flash drives or USB cables where they capture the keystrokes. Spyware is software that's installed on a computer without consent with the main task of monitoring a user's activity. Rootkits are a group of programs that have system-level access, meaning that they can control just about everything. A bot is a computer that's under the control of an attacker, known as a bot herder. Botnets are a network of bots that collectively perform some task. Botnets can be quite dangerous because if you get 1 million systems infected, then you can send lots of traffic to some victim server or company. The control network, where bots and botnets get their commands from, is called a command and control server or network. Ransomware is something that you've probably seen in the news where an attacker locks down a system and the only way to get back access is to pay some ransom fee, usually through cryptocurrency, to get an unlocked code. Crypto malware is basically the same thing, except your data becomes encrypted until you pay up. This type of malware poses a lot of questions. For example, if you really need that data, do you pay? What if you're a government entity? In the United States, the FBI is taking a close look at these situations because it's a serious problem for any business or government. Potentially unwanted programs are programs that a user might not want that came with other software, usually from a website other than the official one. Regardless if the PUPs are legitimate or malicious, you have to be careful. Fileless viruses or fileless malware are a malicious software that runs in memory, making it harder for anti-malware software to stop it. 3 common techniques used by fileless viruses include memory code injection into legitimate applications, script-based techniques where the code decrypts itself only when it's ready to run, making it hard to see what's happening, and Windows registry manipulation. Let's talk about some common indicators when malware is present on a system or a network. First of all, malware generates a lot of abnormal traffic. Data exfiltration, where data is being taken out of the network, is also a possible indicator. Attackers can use encrypted traffic to hide what's going on. There might also be a lot of traffic going to specific IPs where those IP addresses are malicious or known to be blacklisted. And outgoing spam, where there's spikes in the amount of outgoing email traffic. Malware is a serious issue for any organization, and it can cause significant damage. The best strategy to malware is always implement layered defenses, which means several systems or controls to prevent the spread. Some of the common controls include spam filters on mail gateways. This way spam emails are stopped before they even get to the users. Anti-malware software on mail gateways. That way, if there's any attachments in emails, we want to scan them and strip off anything that's potentially dangerous. We also want all of our systems to have anti-malware software installed on them. And firewall inspection, because we want to detect malicious traffic before it enters our networks. Spam filters and firewall inspection is pretty self-explanatory, but let's talk about some of the detection types that anti-malware software uses to find malicious software. Antivirus and anti-malware software is crucial to identifying known malicious software. Your first defense should be running automated scans that are scheduled for at least weekly intervals. We also want them to scan for any attachments or software that's installed immediately. There's some common detection methods that you absolutely have to be familiar with. The first is signature-based detection, which is very common, and that means the antivirus or the anti-malware software is going to compare patterns that it observes against its known signature database to see if there's a match. If there is a match, that file is either flagged, deleted, or quarantined. That means that your detection capability is only as good as your signature database, so keep this updated. Then we have heuristic-based detection, which looks at the behavior of software and it attempts to see if the activities that are being carried out are malicious. This is great for 0 days that might not match a signature database. We have file integrity monitors, which are used by antivirus scanners, and they calculate hashes of system files to determine a baseline, and then they monitor those files to see if the hash has changed, which means those files have changed. If the hash has changed, that means that file has been modified and an alert is generated. And then we have a Cuckoo Sandbox, which is an open source automated software analysis system. With this system, you submit suspicious files to it through a web interface, and then it's going to attempt to analyze the files and create a report. 0-day vulnerabilities, which we also sometimes call O-day vulnerabilities, are bugs or vulnerabilities that weren't previously known or disclosed. Heartbleed and Log4j are some more recent and major 0 days or O-days that have been discovered. Social engineering is a technique that uses social interaction to gain information. For example, if an attacker can convince an employee that they're a senior executive, then they can get confidential information. Social engineering doesn't require any excessive technology and is generally very effective because it exploits human nature in some way. Let's talk about some of the common techniques for social engineering. One option that people will use is flattery, like complimenting somebody. Or you can use position of authority, like our example of a senior executive. You can also encourage somebody to perform a risky action. You can encourage somebody to reveal sensitive information. You can impersonate an authorized service technician. And tailgating, which means following an employee so that the attacker doesn't have to authenticate. If you're interested in learning about social engineering at its finest, Watch the movie Catch Me If You Can or research Frank Abagnale Jr. Let's talk a little bit more about the social engineering techniques. The goal of impersonation is to pose as somebody else to convince authorized users to provide information. For example, if we can convince a front desk worker that we're an authorized technician, then we can get access to the building. Shoulder surfing literally means to watch over somebody's shoulder. For example, if you're typing in your password and I watch over your shoulder, I can get your password. Two of the most common ways to prevent shoulder surfing include monitor placement, making sure that monitors are placed in a way that people can't see them, and using privacy screen filters to obscure the image from side angles. A hoax is a message signaling some impeding doom or bad event which encourages a user to do something like deleting files. Of course, these messages are fake, but if they're successful, they can cause a lot of damage. Tailgating is when somebody follows closely behind an authorized person to gain access without showing credentials. For example, if you had your arms full of boxes and a friendly employee held the door open for you to enter, that would be considered tailgating. In highly secure areas, tailgating is often not allowed because when attackers gain physical access, bad things are much more likely to happen. Man traps are something that we can implement to prevent tailgating. These might come in the form of a turnstile, like you would see at a theme park, or they might be an actual room where you have to close one door to get verified and then you can open the second door. Dumpster diving is when somebody searches through trash containers to find documents that weren't either shredded or discarded properly. Ideal documents include company directories, payroll documents, or really anything that can be used by an attacker. Watering hole attacks are unique in that attackers go after infecting an intermediate target website where employees frequently visit instead of going after the target company directly. Even if your company's security is fantastic, the other website might have poor security and is much easier to utilize for the attack. Typo squatting or URL hijacking is when a domain name that's very close to a legitimate domain name is purchased for malicious purposes. This can be really effective if the domain name is frequently misspelled. From the user standpoint, when I go to the website, it might look identical to the legitimate website, and then I might try to log in or do something, or maybe get infected by something that the attackers put on their malicious website. Elicitation is the ability to get information without directly asking for it. Two common techniques involve saying false statements, hoping that they'll be corrected, or bracketing by giving a range of numbers, like the amount of cameras, with the hopes that the person's going to reveal that exact number. Pretexting means to include a fake story to make a request more believable. Prepending means to add something to the beginning of something else. Prepending adds something to the subject, header, or body of an email with additional data. For example, an attacker might want to add the word safe to the beginning of an email subject. Invoice scams could involve either trying to get a company to pay a seemingly unpaid balance, or they might involve a malicious attachment along with a threat if not paid. Credential harvesting involves collecting usernames and passwords. For example, the attacker might have a malicious website asking a user to log in, the credentials are collected, and then the user's redirected to the legitimate site where they think they entered the wrong password. This can also involve keyloggers on systems to gather credentials. Reconnaissance is simply an attempt to gather as much information as possible. Attackers will try to use open source methods or third parties like social media, and then try to follow up and gain more information directly from the target. Influence campaigns use a variety of sources to influence public perception, such as hybrid warfare and social media. Plain and simple, email and phone calls can be dangerous for organizations when it comes to attacks. These can be combined with social engineering techniques or done on their own. Let's talk about some different types of email and phone attacks. The first is spam, which is unwanted or unsolicited email. We're all familiar with spam email, but some of it can be an annoyance, while other spam email can be malicious. Spam over internet messaging, or SPIM, is unwanted messages that are sent over instant messaging channels. SPIM can also come through text messages. Phishing is when an attacker sends an email to a user to trick them to reveal personal information or to click a link. In phishing emails, the linked websites look legitimate, and the attacker is hopeful that you have an account with that service. However, they send these emails in mass amounts, so they aren't really sure. Phishing emails can also install malware if you click a link or an image. They can validate email addresses for the attacker. They can also get money if you pay for whatever's being asked. Spear phishing is a targeted form of phishing where specific groups or individuals are sent the emails instead of in mass amounts. Whaling is spear phishing that targets high-level executives in a company. Think about the damage that you could do if you phish an executive of a company. Phishing is phishing over the phone, which allows the attacker to spoof their caller ID and appear to be an internal company call. And then smishing is a mashup of SMS or text messages and phishing, and uses text messages instead of email. Now that you know what social engineering is, let's talk more about the types of underlying principles for why it works. First of all, people naturally have been raised to respect authority to a certain extent. So when their manager or a high-level executive asks them to do something within reason, they're almost certainly going to do it without question. Intimidation. If an executive assistant calls you and says they need a specific file or $1 million deal is going to fall through, would you fight back? When people are facing fierce intimidation like this, they're likely going to comply. Consensus. People are more willing to believe something if the crowd supports it. Think about when you shop on a website like Amazon. you're more likely to buy a product with many reviews or purchases than a similar product with less. It's the same in this situation. If somebody believes that there's a lot of people that support a software product that's malicious, then they're probably going to go with it. Scarcity. People have severe fear of missing out, or FOMO, so if quantities of some product are seen as limited, then they're more likely to act. Attackers love to take advantage of this. Urgency. If a product or service has a countdown timer, people will start to feel the urgency to act. Attackers can take advantage of this just like scarcity. Familiarity. People are much more likely to do something for people they like. If a social engineer can build rapport with you and get you to like them, you're more likely to act in their favor. And trust. Like familiarity, if attackers can get you to trust them, then you're more likely to act in their favor. Trust can take time to cultivate, but it can be done with titles, employers, or many other ways.